Socrates. 1. Introduction. 2. Early life and background. 3. The Socratic method and philosophy. 4. Socrates and Athenian society. 5. The trial of Socrates. 6. Death and final days. 7. Legacy and influence. 8. Historical interpretations and the problem of sources. 9. Socrates in popular culture and philosophy. 10. Conclusion, a life worth examining. 1. Introduction. Socrates stands as one of the most pivotal figures in the history of Western philosophy, living in ancient Athens during the 5th century BC. He profoundly shaped the course of philosophical inquiry and ethical thinking. Despite writing nothing himself, his teachings and life are known primarily through the works of his students, especially Plato and Xenophon, and from comedic portrayals by Aristophanes. Socrates introduced a new way of thinking, one centered on dialogue, critical questioning, and ethical introspection. His legacy lives not in texts but in a method of inquiry that continues to inspire educators, lawyers, philosophers, and students alike. 2. Early life and background. Socrates was born in 469 BC in the deme of Elopus in Athens. His father, Sophroniscus, was a stonemason or sculptor, and his mother, Phanerete, was a midwife. Socrates likely received a traditional Athenian education that included literature, music, physical training, and some exposure to philosophy and rhetoric. Though his family was not wealthy, they were respectable. Socrates himself lived a life of modesty and simplicity, often going barefoot, wearing simple clothing, and demonstrating indifference to wealth and material possessions. He married a woman named Xanthippe, who, according to various accounts, had a difficult temperament. They had 3 sons. Socrates was said to have initially followed his father's trade but ultimately devoted his life to philosophy. There is no firm evidence that he traveled widely, though he served in the Athenian army and participated in several campaigns, including the Battle of Potidaea, where he showed remarkable courage. 3. The Socratic method and philosophy. Socrates did not establish a formal school or write any philosophical treatises. Instead, he engaged citizens in conversations in the Athenian agora, asking probing questions about fundamental concepts like justice, virtue, piety, and truth. Central to Socratic philosophy is the belief that knowledge and virtue are inseparable. He argued that all wrongdoing is the result of ignorance and that anyone who truly understands what is right will act accordingly. This idea formed the basis of intellectualism, a school of thought that links moral behavior to rational understanding. Socrates is best known for the Socratic method, a dialectical technique involving questions and answers to stimulate critical thinking and to illuminate ideas. Through this method, he would expose contradictions in his interlocutors' views, leading them to realize their own ignorance. This process was not meant to humiliate, but to encourage a deeper pursuit of knowledge and self-examination. He famously claimed, "I know that I know nothing," suggesting that wisdom begins with recognizing the limits of one's knowledge. 4. Socrates and Athenian society. Socrates lived during a time of political upheaval in Athens, which included the Peloponnesian War, the rule of the 30 tyrants, and the restoration of democracy. His teachings, though not overtly political, had social implications that challenged the status quo. He openly criticized the sophists, popular teachers who claimed to teach success in public life for a fee, arguing that they corrupted rather than enlightened their students. Socrates himself accepted no money and claimed to possess no wisdom, positioning himself instead as a seeker of truth. Socrates was skeptical of democracy, not because he favored tyranny, but because he believed that uninformed majorities could make irrational decisions. He argued that leadership should be based on knowledge and virtue, not popularity. His influence on young Athenians like Alcibiades and Critias, both of whom played controversial roles in Athenian politics, led many to view him with suspicion. Although he did not support their actions, his association with them would come back to haunt him. 5. The trial of Socrates. In 399 BC, Socrates was brought to trial on charges of impiety, not recognizing the gods of the city, and corrupting the youth. The trial took place in the Athenian Heliaea, a popular court of hundreds of citizen jurors. The main accusers were Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon. They argued that Socrates had introduced new divinities, disrespected the established gods, and led the youth astray with his questioning of moral traditions. Plato's Apology gives a detailed account of Socrates' defense. He did not beg for mercy or attempt to flatter the jurors. Instead, he boldly defended his philosophical mission, claiming that he had been divinely appointed to provoke Athenians into examining their lives. He was found guilty by a narrow margin. During sentencing, rather than proposing exile or another lesser punishment, Socrates sarcastically suggested he be rewarded with free meals for life. As was done for Olympic champions, the jury instead sentenced him to death. 6. Death and final days. Socrates spent his final days in prison, discussing philosophy with his followers. He had the opportunity to escape with the help of his friends, but he refused, arguing that escaping would violate his commitment to the laws and justice of the state, even if those laws had condemned him unjustly. According to Plato's Phaedo, Socrates met his death calmly. Surrounded by his students, he drank a cup of hemlock and died with composure, discussing the soul's immortality and the nature of the afterlife until his last breath. His final words reportedly were, "Credo, we owe a cock to Asclepius, pay it and do not forget." This enigmatic statement is often interpreted to mean that death was a kind of healing or liberation. 7. Legacy and influence. Socrates' death shocked Athens and the broader philosophical community, though he had been a divisive figure in life. His death elevated him to the status of a martyr for truth and intellectual freedom. His student Plato dedicated his life to preserving and expanding Socratic philosophy through dialogues such as Apology, Credo, Phaedo, and Republic. Plato presented Socrates as a model of virtue and reason. These works shaped the Western philosophical tradition for centuries to come. Aristotle, Plato's student, was also deeply influenced by Socratic questioning, even as he charted his own philosophical path. Later schools of thought, including the Stoics, Skeptics, Cynics, and early Christian philosophers, drew on Socratic ideas about virtue, the soul, and the examined life. In the Enlightenment era, thinkers such as Voltaire, Rousseau, and Kant admired Socrates as a symbol of reason and moral courage. Today, the Socratic method remains widely used in education, particularly in law schools and philosophy courses, as a way to develop analytical skills and ethical reasoning. 8. Historical interpretations and the problem of sources. A major challenge in studying Socrates is the Socratic problem, the difficulty of distinguishing the historical Socrates from the fictionalized versions in Plato and others. Different sources present conflicting images. Plato's Socrates is a moral and metaphysical thinker, concerned with justice, truth, and the soul. Xenophon's Socrates is more practical, conservative, and focused on ethics and piety. Aristophanes' Socrates, in the comedic play The Clouds, is a ridiculous figure engaged in absurd speculations, representing the public's distrust of intellectualism. Despite these discrepancies, all accounts agree on certain traits. Socrates was charismatic, witty, stubbornly principled, and driven by a sense of divine mission. He was revered by his followers and feared by his critics for the same reason: his relentless questioning of assumptions. 9. Socrates in popular culture and philosophy. Socrates' story has become a cultural touchstone. He appears in countless plays, films, and books as the archetype of the philosopher hero who stands by truth at the cost of his life. His commitment to intellectual honesty and moral courage resonates across time and cultures. Philosophers such as Nietzsche, Heidegger, and Kierkegaard have wrestled with his legacy. Nietzsche criticized Socrates for overemphasizing reason at the expense of life's passions. while Kierkegaard admired his commitment to inner truth and personal ethics. Modern democratic societies value Socrates as a champion of free speech, rational discourse, and citizen responsibility. He reminds us that questioning authority is essential to the health of a republic. 10. Conclusion: a life worth examining. Socrates lived according to the principle that an examined life is not worth living. He devoted himself to uncovering truth not as a possession, but as a lifelong pursuit. Through relentless inquiry, he taught that wisdom begins in recognizing one's ignorance. Though condemned by his city, Socrates ultimately triumphed in the realm of ideas. His life and death continue to challenge each generation to think more deeply, live more ethically, and engage more honestly with others. He left behind no books, no school, and no doctrine. Instead, he left a method, a model, and a question: are we living examined lives?
Subscribe to my channel!